step family structure makes step parents stuck outsiders and parents stuck insiders.
Welcome to the Couples Therapist Couch, the podcast for couples therapists, marriage counselors, and relationship coaches to explore the practice of couples therapy. And now, your host, Shane Birkel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Couples Therapist Couch. This is Shane Birkel, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Patricia Papernow. She's the author of 3 books on stepfamilies, and she's the 2023 recipient of the Award for Distinguished Contribution to Family Therapy from the American Family Therapy Academy for her work on stepfamily relationships. Hey Patricia, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today about stepfamily relationships, but why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I got into this because I was about 6 or 7 years into my first marriage, where I had 2 stepdaughters who were 5 and 9 when I met them. And by then they were 11 and 15. And I was interested in how things had changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was partly that the kids got older, but that something shifted in our family. So that was my dissertation in my first book on stages of development becoming, at that point, we call it a remarried family. We don't call them that anymore because many of them are not remarried. Many are not married. And I got hooked. So I've been doing this for decades now, and I keep learning more, and we keep learning more about what works and what doesn't in these families.
That's great. And I know that your book is one of the only ones that I could find out there on this. And you were just telling me before we started recording about there's such a lack of research on this or something. Can you speak to that?
There is actually a lot of good research. What there isn't is good clinical training.
Mm-hmm.
This is, as we'll talk about a bit, stepfamilies are a fundamentally different structure. They create some intense challenges for kids and adults and therapists. And if you use your first-time family map, you're a little bit like trying to drive around New York City with a map of Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of wrong turns, a lot of well-meaning guidance that's wrong and sometimes destructive. So I'm glad to be here because 42% of Americans have a close stepfamily relationship, and there is almost no clinical training.
Wow. And can you mention the title of your, I don't know if it was your first book, the one that you authored by yourself, or I don't know, both your books, I guess, so that people can know where to find that before you get into it.
Two books to look for: Surviving and Thriving in Stepfamily Relationships, What Works and What Doesn't. That was published in 2013. That has a lot of clinical work in it for those of you who are clinicians or helping professionals. But I wrote it for both stepfamily members and helping professionals, and it seems to be useful to both. And the other, published more recently, is the Stepfamily Handbook with Karen Vanell, From Dating to Getting Serious to Forming a Blended Family, in quotes. We always put quotes around blended family. And that one's written for the public in a breezier style. As you can hear in the title, it starts earlier and goes step by step. There's no clinical work in it. No research is mentioned. They're both good, and my clients like to read both, and they are both on audio tape.
Oh, great. So, let's dive into it. What are some of the things people need to consider when we're talking about stepfamily relationships and helping people have healthy relationships with their stepfamilies?
Well, I think the first thing to know is, here's the overview. Stepfamilies are fundamentally different from first-time families. So let's talk a little bit about what those differences are. And those differences make, I talk about 5 major challenges. And stepfamily dynamics are pretty intense and complex, but having a map of those challenges help. And we have a lot of good research and clinical work now about what works and what doesn't to meet them.
Great.
So let's start with how they're different.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, exactly.
All right. In a first-time couple, I talk about first-time families and stepfamilies. And a first-time couple has time together. time to build trust. We call it attachment. Time to feel comfortable with each other. Time to get to know to develop some ways of doing things, and to get to know, I hate how he loads the dishwasher, but to get used to the fact that he loads the dishwasher differently from the way I do. And kids in a first-time couple enter the couple's established relationship. And really important for our story, kids in a first-time family enter hardwired for attachment to both parents and vice versa. And over time, a first-time family builds ways of doing things, values, how we do things. The second kid enters that developing network of attachment and ways of doing things, also hardwired for attachment in both directions. If that family splits up, you know how in the States, usually 2 single parent families.
Mm-hmm.
And the step parent enters as an outsider to that already established parent-child attachment and ways of doing things, not only between parents and children, but between kids and a parent outside the household. And all kinds of understandings about how we do things that no longer have language until somebody does something that isn't the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
So step parents have to build a relationship from scratch, and it is really quite different.
Yeah, and as you're talking about that, I'm thinking too, the whole transitional period, if parents are going through a separation and a divorce, that whole transitional period where everything the child grew up with is changing as they're getting used to doing it one parent's way and then the other parent's way, and that needs to take probably a lot of time for children to adapt to, and the timing must have a big be significant when the new step parent is coming into the situation.
You are absolutely right. You've just foreshadowed the first challenges. Here are the 5 challenges. The first challenge is that kids come into a step family very differently than the way they come into a first-time family. For kids, the adults are often thrilled, but for kids in a step family, kids often bring a huge sense of loss. They often have loyalty binds, and they're dealing with a huge amount of change. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is that step family structure makes step parents stuck outsiders and parents stuck insiders. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the third challenge is that parenting tasks divide parents and step parents. And step parenting and parenting are very different. They're both really important for kids. We'll talk some. We're learning more and more and more about what a good step parent role looks like. And the fourth challenge is we have to build a new family culture in the presence of at least 2 already existing cultures. And you already have kids and adults who've had a lot of loss and are not real interested sometimes in more brand new. Mm-hmm. And the fifth, last but not least, is another parent, at least one, outside the family, is a permanent part of every step family. And so is the ex-spouse relationship, for better or for worse. Those are the 5 challenges.
Yeah, this is great. So is it okay if we kind of dig into them a little bit more?
Absolutely. Shall we start with the first one?
Yeah.
So kids bring losses, loyalty binds, and too much change too fast. So first I'll say what we know about this challenge. Oh, and let me say that I have a 3-level framework for working with these challenges. The first is psychoeducation, knowing what's normal, what works and what doesn't. I mean, we're taught to pay attention to process, especially as couples therapists, and process is very important in step families. And it's good to have a map. Knowing what's normal, knowing what works and what's not is really important for step couples.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me as far as these situations go, because people are, just normalizing their experience so that they don't feel like they're the problem. Like, there are a lot of people who are facing these sorts of same types of issues.
Absolutely. And you know, when you're trying to, the reason I put quotes around blended is that it's the wish more than a reality. And as long as we're straining for blending, on top of these challenges, we add a whole boatload of shame and guilt and upset. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
So psychoeducation is really important. The second level is interpersonal connection. Successful step families and struggling step families face the same challenges. Successful step families have better skills, use better skills for interpersonal connection. So really important for you guys as couples therapists, whatever you're training, this will really be important for step couples. And the third, especially because these challenges divide step couples a lot. And the third is intrapsychic family of origin work. And I don't start there in a step couple. The intensity of these challenges often leads therapists without training in step families to start with what in your family of origin makes it so upsetting for you, step parent, to be an outsider. Well, being an outsider is upsetting. So I always start with the first two levels. What's normal, what works and what doesn't, and how can we help you hang in with each other instead of pushing each other away and making a mess? If that doesn't work, if the reactivity stays high or low, then I'm getting interested in what I call them old bruises. What old bruises are making this harder for you? And if we could heal some, you're never going to like this. It's hard, and you'll have more resources. So it's those three levels. I'll mostly talk about the first today, just because it's so important.
Yeah, that's great. I think, you know, when people come into our office and they're really struggling and stressed out about their, step parenting situation or something like that, whatever the topic is, I do think that's something that a lot of therapists jump to too quickly, which is exploring their family of origin. They really just want to figure out how to fix the situation at hand. And
You
we, as
got it.
therapists, we might have insight that it's connected to other things like their family of origin, but we're really not speaking, we're not honoring what they're bringing into the moment if we are just sort of go straight there instead of really looking at what's in front of us first.
I think that's really true. And I do start a genogram. It's on, I have a terrible memory, so it's a piece of paper. I still use paper on the left side of my folder, and I fill it in as we go. But I don't go to that third level until we've done the first two.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about kids come with losses, loyalty binds, and too much change. Loss, you've mentioned a bit. There's already the loss of divorce already. And study after study is telling us that when parents recouple, kids lose parental time and attention. Now, why is this? First of all, grown-ups are just as absolutely gaga when they fall in love as teenagers are. So they're sitting doing homework with their kid, texting their sweetie. They're sitting at dinner texting their sweetie. And when that new person moves in, there's somebody new in a hot relationship that the parent is engaged with that turns the parent away from kids. So the adults, there's nothing better than finding a new sweetie. And for the kids, there's often a sense of loss. And the second thing is loyalty binds. If I care about my step parent, am I disloyal to my parent? If I care about my stepmother, am I disloyal to my mom? These, especially in our culture, where we have an idea of family that has two parents and kids, in our culture, there seems to be an almost loyalty. Kids often feel loyalty binds.
Mm-hmm.
Those soften if the adults are all supporting each other.
Right.
However, recoupling is often quite upsetting or anxiety provoking to the parent in the other house. And if either parent is bad mouthing the other, loyalty binds could be really intense for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the third is change. There's been a lot of change. A new step parent is a huge change for kids. And if that person has kids that much bigger, and often people move, and the adults want to move fast, they're in love. And for kids, as the pace of change goes up, well-being goes down. Lots of studies. And for many kids, the adjustment to step family is actually more difficult than the adjustment to divorce. And we think that's partly because the change has piled up. So we often have to help couples slow down. So let's go back and talk about how do we help kids with these things.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because well, one thing you said, if parents are really accepting of the other partner's relationship and really explaining it to the kid and communicating well, and I was thinking, well, most people aren't doing that, I'm sure.
Right. I think there is more understanding in our culture than there used to be that fighting and divorce is bad for kids. So the level of high conflict couples has gone down, the percentage, but we still
Mhm.
got them. And it is really scary often too, of mom. I mean, imagine you've got a adult you didn't choose is now closely involved with your kids and you can't supervise them.
Mhm.
A, and B, the worry that I'm going to lose my kids to this new relationship.
Mhm.
So keeping the conflict down and openly supporting each other really helps kids. But let's
Right.
go back to loss.
Yeah.
Kids need one-to-one time with their parents. Step families really do need to spend time together doing fun things. And step parents need to spend some regular, reliable one-to-one time where their kid has their full attention.
Mhm.
And that's the loss piece. The change piece is you got to slow down, guys. And as therapists, we got to be empathic about this.
Mhm.
You're sitting with a couple, they moved in within 6 months, that great for them, and the kids are a complete mess.
Right.
So we don't want to just say there's some skill in doing psychoeducation. It's shaming to have information that you screwed up.
Right.
So important to say, I totally get it. You guys really wanted to move quickly. And it turns out this is hard for kids. And unfortunately, you're living with this. So let's
Mhm.
figure out a way for you guys to slow down. If the couple has already moved in together, let's up the one-to-one time with between parent and child, and let's slow the family time. If you guys have not moved in together, maybe let's slow the amount of time that step parent comes over. Let's make sure we tell the kids. Kids say things happen and adults don't tell them.
Right.
Um, uh, and so lots of information about changes. Karen Bonnell, who I know you have interviewed and who is my co-author on Step Family Handbook, Karen says, a new puppy is a great surprise for kids. Janie's coming over tonight and she's spending the night is not a good surprise for kids. And Janie's moving in next week is really not a good surprise for kids. So
Uh-huh.
kids need warning. Janie is coming over tomorrow night. She will stay for dinner and then go home.
Right.
Um,
And what do you think about there being a time frame where they don't tell the kid that it's actually a dating situation where it's a friend that they're having over for dinner for some period of time?
that's a great idea, and you may not even want to have the person, if you can stand it, not even have the person to dinner for a while until
Uh-huh.
and everybody thinks a relationship is serious when you first start. We all think that. That's how
Yeah.
we're wired. But we all know it's different hormones when you get involved than when you're dating. So wait, if you can, until you're fully committed
Mhm.
to introduce kids, and start slow. Run into each other in the park.
Mhm.
Attend a temple or church event or school event where the other person happens to be. And here's another clue. When you are with your new step parent couple, your new sweetie, pay attention to your kids.
Mhm.
And that's hard for step parents. Good to warn step parents. It's a not good surprise that when we're with the kids, I'm going to need to spend my attention on the kids so that it's easier for them that you're here.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's probably not the person's first
No,
intuition to do that.
it's not. And here's another one. Physical contact in step couples needs to be kept private. What the
Mhm.
parent will often say is, I really want my kids to see a positive relationship. My wife and I never touched each other. Well, it's a good idea, except it's a wrong idea. It
Mhm.
turns out when step couples are physical, that intensifies all the stuff we've just talked about. Loss, I've lost my parent. Loyalty binds, ooh, mama's in here. And the sense of change, it's too much for kids. So be physical with each other, guys. and do it in private away from kids.
Yeah, great.
So
Good.
that's the first challenge.
Yeah, so that was number one.
And number
Right.
2 is what couples therapists are very likely to see right off the bat. Step parents are stuck outsiders. Parents are stuck insiders. In a first-time family, when a kid enters the room, both parents are attached to the kid. The kid is attached to both parents. We do know from Marcia Klein Pruitt's work that there are developmental stages where kids hate mommy or hate daddy. But if I'm the one being hated, it hurts. But I have in my body the experience of having held that kid and having felt that kid totally attached to me. Step parents don't have that. So every time a kid walks into the room, say I'm the parent and you're the step parent, and my kid's on the bus and she just made the soccer team or she did not make the soccer team. And she bursts into the house. Now, just before she bursts into the house, you have finally gotten some moments with me. And you, step parent, are talking to me. You got my full attention. And my daughter burst into the house. Who does she need? Now, step parents are really important for kids, as we'll see, and it's her parent who is her secure base. She bursts in and says, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And I'm a good parent. I turn towards my kid. In a step family, I am turning away from you. And that's we humans aren't wired for this. We are wired to expect that the people close to us turn towards us. And when they turn away, it is upsetting. And it's, you feel invisible, you feel left, you feel rejected. So to know that this is normal, this outsider stuff, this is not because you're failing, not because you're bad, but because the structure makes you an outsider, that can be very, very helpful. And it makes me, the parent, the stuck insider. So I turn to my kid, I'm being a good mommy. And later on, you get up your nerve and say, "Sweetie, that was hard." What was hard? Or if you do it badly, here's that second interpersonal level, you say, "You did it again." You let your kid interrupt us. Now I turn to my kid and my sweetie's upset. Now, if I hadn't turned to my kid and turned to kept with my sweetie and told my kid to wait, my kid would have been upset. So stuck insiders are constantly feeling they cannot please the people who are important to them. Right. And now let's add in the ex-spouse. You're the step parent. You want me to set some limits with her or him. And I know that if I set limits, my ex partner is going to get even worse. So you're the stuck outsider. I'm the stuck insider. And insiders often feel inadequate. They feel anxious. They often get defensive, especially if step parents are unskillful in how they approach, which is easy to do. And that second interpersonal level is really important for this challenge. Can step parents, those of you who are emotionally EFT trained, can step parents learn to reach instead of to clobber? Can parents take a breath and hear instead of getting defensive?
Yeah.
That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that seems like a really important place where that psychoeducation is important. So
it helps a lot,
because we're bringing assumptions that this should be easy. Why don't the kids like me? Why doesn't my partner deal with this better? And
exactly.
And
then parents will often say, "Just join in."
Yeah, right. And what you're talking about is really more of a framework for things to look out for. This is a normal way to feel. It's normal to get defensive. It's not, to sort of help them sort of see how that plays out and how it makes sense that it's playing out in that way. Yeah.
And I will often say, often step couples come in stuck in that insider outsider. Why didn't you? But they're my kids. What's your problem? And of course, that makes the step parent feel worse. They either withdraw or they attack, and it gets worse and worse. So I often start by saying, "Time out, guys. Can I tell you something about what's happening here?"
Yeah.
And when I start a piece of psychoed, I usually ask, "Do you want to hear? Can I tell you something?" So that helps them sort of take a breath and sit forward and be ready.
Yeah.
You're struggling, and you're struggling not because either of you is doing something bad, or wrong. You're struggling because you actually live in a step family, not a first-time family.
Mm-hmm.
And this structure makes you, step parent, an outsider over and over again. Every time the kids come in, parent and child are connected and you are disconnected. And outsiders feel left out. They often feel invisible. It doesn't feel good. And parent, you're a stuck insider. Every time your kid or your ex reaches for you, you turn towards them. You have to turn away from your partner, and they get upset with you. So no matter how much you do, you can't please everybody you care about, everybody important to you. Does that sound right? Yes. What's that like to hear? Relief. Can you tell each other? Because I'm telling them in front of each other.
Yeah.
Important in couples work. Can you tell each other? That's a relief. Just turn to each other. And then I've got a little tiny moment of connection before they go back into their mess.
Yeah. And can you, I mean, I want to make it explicit. I'm assuming that a lot of these types of conversations are really important to have without the children present.
Yes, absolutely. Move to the last challenge, which, yes, what we know about is what's bad for kids is not divorce. It's not single parent families. It's not step families. The most robust predictor of poor well-being of kids is tension, adult tension, and not just major fighting, but tension raises kids. It compromises their immune response. It interrupts their academic functioning, and it also makes focus and attention more difficult. All of that's because adult tension impacts sleep. So take it to the sideline, guys.
Yeah. Well, and even these sort of respectful, touching, meaningful conversations about this is how I felt when that was happening might be helpful to keep apart from the children, so that the children don't feel like they have to, be living up to some sort of like level of performing for the adults in the situation.
Well, and so the kid, yes, I think that's right. And the other thing is these conversations go awry really quickly. So best to have them offline.
Right. Great.
So these challenges are hard. But if you, I have a thing I call Papernow's bruise theory of feelings. If I bang my arm where the flesh is healthy, it hurts. If I bang it where I've got a bruise, it hurts a whole different way. If I have a deep bruise, you only have to touch. And you're going to get a trauma response: fight, flight, freeze, submit. If you came from a family where you were the stuck outsider, this challenge is going to be that much more intense. So again, I want to say to couples, and same with if you were the stuck insider. I was the stuck outsider in my first marriage. My husband had 2 kids. We were together for 10 years. We had a child together. I was a single parent for 10 years. And in the first marriage, I didn't like being an outsider, but I'm the insider in my family. I'm the oldest and the only girl, and I'm the caretaker. Many of us are. So, I knew I'd get inside. My first marriage, when my husband needed to go pick his kids up at the airport, for the first few times, I'd go with them. After that, I said, you take them to McDonald's. And I'll see you in a couple hours. He would spend hours putting his younger daughter to bed, which I didn't like, but it didn't trigger me. I just said, honey, could you make it shorter? And I got a good book. My second, when I started dating with my kid was 3 when I started dating. We had a child in that marriage. And so I was a single parent. When I met my second husband, I was much more anxious. I got my butt back into therapy because I couldn't please them both. So these challenges make intense feelings no matter where you come from. If in addition you have what I call a bad bruise in a wrong place, they may be that much more intense. And but getting some help to heal those old bruises can free some resources to show up for this challenge.
Yeah, and I appreciate you talking about your personal experiences. And it's good for people to realize like things that things that might be hard for other people might not be hard for you, and vice
And
versa.
vice
You
versa.
never know
Absolutely.
where those
What
bruises
it's
are
going to hit.
sometimes. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
So that's the second challenge.
Yeah.
The third challenge is really important. And we actually know quite a lot about parenting and step parenting and discipline and step families. And this is a place where step couples often go awry. It turns out that both parents and step parents are really important, but parenting and step parenting are really different because of that difference in attachment. And it turns out there's step parents everywhere. And I'm not taught all over the world. Step parents everywhere want more limits and boundaries for their step kids. And parents everywhere want more love and understanding for their kids. So my kid leaves a mess in the kitchen. She made herself cocoa. She's my kid. I also, as a single parent, was glad when she took care of herself. You walk into the kitchen, you like having a clean kitchen, and there is cocoa all over the kitchen. And the kid who left the mess barely says hello to you. So one thing I did not say is if your kid in a loyalty bind, even saying hello to your step parent may be difficult. If you've had a lot of losses and your dad or mom is really engaged with this new person, you're not going to feel real welcoming of a new person. So the kids' challenges often mean that it is hard for them to welcome a new step parent. And so even a step parent who's pretty warm and accepting, kids may be rejecting of, which intensifies that insider-outsider thing we just talked about. So back to parenting. Turns out we know a lot about what works and what doesn't. Step parents often are expected to step into discipline. It turns out we have decades of research about this. Parents need to retain the limit-setting disciplinary role until or unless kids feel they have a trusting, caring relationship with their step parent. Meanwhile, step parents need to focus on what I call connection rather than correction. Focus on getting to know step kids. Focus on being interested in them. Now that can be hard if that particular kid is in a deep loyalty bond and they're not talking to you. Right. That gets harder. To pick the kid who's most open to you, find one-to-one things to do with that kid that are easy. You have a really shy boy who is completely overwhelmed, but it turns out his stepmom was captain of her basketball team and the kid plays basketball. So the two they shoot hoops together. That works. You have a 12-year-old, I forgot to say this about kids. 8 and under is much easier.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
That's really important. Adolescents are much more hard. 12-year-old girls are the hardest, which was the age of my daughter when I met my second husband. I don't know if this research had been done yet, but I sure lived it. So if you have a 12-year-old girl, even if she's not in a loyalty bind, she may be much more challenging. Just expect it.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention, we are talking about families with young kids, just a slightly different subject to layer on this. The divorce rate in the United States is at a 40-year low. It's partly because the marriage rate is low, except over 50, where it doubled between 2010 and 2000, I think it's 19. So that we call that gray divorce. And after gray divorce comes gray recoupling. Right. And the gray couple with adult kids now and grandkids, the fantasy is the dog's dead, the kids are out of the house, and it's just us. And when I teach, I put up a slide of the happy couple. with the genogram. And then I put up a second slide with all of the other layers of kids and grandparents and uncles and aunts filled in with all of the lines for connection. Turns out you're not alone. And not only that, there are decades of relationships now. These challenges are just as intense. And young adult and adult daughters turn out to have an especially hard time with later life dads recoupling. So we could come back to that maybe.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's especially if the dad has been very close to that daughter because the marriage was bad. And now dad's in love. You've lost him.
Right.
Or dad was busy, the marriage was not great, and dad was being a good provider. He was out working all the time. And daughter said, he never even showed up for my basketball games, and I was the captain of the basketball team. And now he's in love, and he wants me to come meet this new person. I barely have him. Why would I want to meet this new person?
Right. And now I see how much time he has carved out for this other person that he never had for me.
That's well put, Shane. I'm going to borrow that. I'll give you credit. Yes, exactly. And the mistake that the couples make and therapists make is, this is the reality. She's an adult. Well, yeah, it's the reality. The new couple is a reality. So is decades of parent-child relationships a reality.
Yeah.
So the biggest mistake that gray couplers make is stepmom says, you can't be with her unless I'm there. Or dad says to his daughter, you have to accept reality. You can't be with us you can't be with me unless you're willing to have her, my new sweetie, here. That's devastating for daughters.
Yeah.
And important for couples therapists. I call them easy wrong turn. The big easy wrong turn for couples therapists with these later life couples is make your couple primary. And that is also a big easy wrong turn with step families with younger kids. Couple relationship is really important. We've talked a little bit about how challenging it can be. Really important to feed your adult couple relationship. And I left out an insider outsider. We need one-to-one time all through the family. We need family time where we're having a really good time together, doing something fun, blowing up balloons,
right.
Playing in the mud. But we also need one-to-one time with parent-child. We've talked about the couple needs one-to-one time. And step parents and step kids need one-to-one time without the parent, because when the parent is present, that stronger relationship dominates, and the step parent is the outsider. So I've just distracted myself. Let's see, where are we?
Well, no, that was great. That was really good. But we were talking about how the parents with younger kids can navigate the, taking authority over who's parenting and who's enforcing consequences and things like that.
Thank you. That's exactly where we were. So step parents, you're going to want to enforce because the kid's behavior is more upsetting to you than it is to the parent. And it is important for step couples to talk a lot about discipline and kids offline, away from kids. Step parents need to have a voice. They need to have input. And oftentimes we have to help couples really hear each other. That's that interpersonal level. This is an easy one for the step parent to say, you should be punishing your daughter for leaving cocoa all over the kitchen. And the parent says she's just being a kid. The step parent feels unheard and gets more frustrated. The parent feels more protective and gets more permissive. And they're off. I call it the polarization polka. The more harsh the step parent wants to be, the more protective the parent wants to be. When in fact, what kids need is, it's called authoritative parenting. They need warmth and care and responsiveness and calm limit setting by parents. And from step parents, what they need is supportive, leading with warmth, leading, not control. And here's some really interesting new research. We have some new research in the last few years that there are a bunch of step-parent roles that work. We have research that positive relationships with step-parents support kids' health and physical well-being. Negative relationships with step-parents, and this is longitudinal research, much poorer health and mental health outcomes. And there are some roles, very positive roles, and there is a wide range from very close and engaged, sort of parent-like, more likely with younger kids, to primarily focusing on academics, helping with school, helping with homework, to warm and engaged, but casual, everyday talk about school, about sports, and all three of those roles are connected to significantly better well-being in kids. So to be a, quote, good step-parent, you do not have to be parent-like. You just have to lead with warmth and connection, not control. As long as you're leading that way, all of these roles work for kids. And here's what we know about what doesn't work. We know authoritarian parenting by step-parents. You will do this or else is toxic to step-parent, stepchild relationships. And we now have decades of research about that. It is the style step-parents are pulled to, because step-kids, especially step-kids that aren't talking to you, are irritating.
Right. Well, and so many of the parents have had that type of parenting themselves growing up.
Exactly. If you came from a family where you had authoritarian jump, and I'm supposed to say how high, that feels natural. That feels a natural way to parent. And by the way, as a step parent, if the parent is doing good authoritative parenting, they're leading with compassion and care. Okay, honey, you're having trouble cleaning up. Let's help you do it. For step parents raised in authoritarian families, that looks wimpy.
Right.
And so I call it a double whammy. If you're a step parent and you grew up in a family of jump how high, you're gonna have a double pull, because your position in the family is going to pull you there, because the kids are more irritating to you than they are to your partner. And the way that you grew up, it feels natural. And what I say to those step parents is, oh, you have a double whammy here.
Right.
You're pulled what feels natural and right to you. Turns out we know something about this. Want to hear? And I wait for them to ask. Want to hear? I don't think you'll like this. It turns out that's the parenting style that is most toxic to step-parent, stepchild relationships. And you're living it. You're living it. You can, things are going awry. And it may be partly because your partner isn't being firm enough. You may be right about that. You may, often when this goes well, I call it a collaborative cha-cha, step parents can help parents firm up. You may need to help your partner firm up a little bit. But you're going to have input, and the parent is going to have final say. And I can tell you, 27 years down the line, my husband still thinks I'm a wimp with my daughter.
Right.
What's different is, we kid about it. Neither of us are triggered about it.
Right.
And I am firmer than I used to be, but he's much more likely to say to me, honey, you let her get away with that again. It's like, oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And that's hard for someone to hear, but it's so important, right? Because if their primary goal is to have a better relationship with their stepchild, and they can see that, look, this isn't working, let me give you some suggestions of what would work better. That's such important information for them to hear.
It really is. And I always ask 0 to 10, how hard will this be for you? 10 really hard, 0 a cinch. It's going to be an 8. Okay, let's talk about it some more. It's going to be an 8. You may need to step out, step parent. And step parents they need time away. This outsider position is really hard. Step parents need time outside the family, where they're not hanging in that outsider position, where they're not irritated by kids or feeling horrible with kids who don't even look at them.
Right.
Go play basketball, Go join a volleyball team that gets you out at least once a week. So that leaves the parent home alone with their kids, which is better. Go see your Aunt Grace, who adores you. Go see your best friend who adores you, so that you have some experience of being an insider and being out of this hard position. And some people will say, well, that's not family-like. Well, it's not first-time family-like. But step parents need a break.
Yeah.
And getting a break makes it easier to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching the show. I'm Shane Birkel, and this is the Couples Therapist Couch podcast, a podcast that's all about the practice of couples therapy. If you enjoyed the show, please hit subscribe. Please hit the like button. And you can continue to get all of the most up-to-date information in the world of couples therapy. If you are a therapist who's interested in learning more about the practice of therapy, or if you're someone who just wants to learn more about how to have a good relationship, definitely hit subscribe so you can get all of the latest episodes. Thank you so much. Also, if you're interested in the Couples Therapist Inner Circle, you can click on the link in the show notes. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Shane Birkel. This is the Couples Therapist Couch.